and we'd chatted pleasantly on the ridiculously protracted journey. He'd said he was still suffering from jet lag after only 2 days in England, so I could understand his sleepiness. But he was as much overdue for his commitments as I was for mine. I decided it would be a kindness to serve as his alarm clock. I tapped him on the shoulder. Mr. Oh, for heaven's sake, what was his name? Something Irish, I was sure. We'd talked about that. This was his first trip to the UK, and he was going to look up his Irish forebears if he had time after he finished with his business. Riley, was it? O'Brien? No, something less common than those, but it wasn't coming to me. His first name I did remember. Bill, we're here, finally. We're in London. Bill, wake up. I tapped him again, a little harder. His head rolled to the side, and his shoulder and torso followed, slumping against me. I suppressed a yelp and tried to move him. He was unresponsive, a dead weight. Suddenly there didn't seem to be quite enough air in my lungs. I reached with one hand for the hand grip on the back of a seat, and with the other put 2 fingers under Bill's collar. The flesh was warm, but I could feel no pulse. I gulped and tried to take deep breaths. "Excuse me, may I pass through?" I looked back with infinite relief. Someone had come through from the next car. The man trying to get up the aisle looked in his dark suit and hat extremely respectable, a help in time of trouble. "I'm sorry, but this man... Well, the fact is, he seems to be... I was just talking to him a little while ago, and it seems impossible, but I think he's dead." Why is it so hard to pronounce such a short, simple word? Mr. Respectable gave me a sharp look. "He must be ill. Let me past, please. I'm a doctor." Even better. I moved carefully out of the way, trying to keep the pathetic thing that had been Bill from sliding farther out of its seat. I didn't quite like to leave, though I was by this time pretty sure Bill was beyond any help we could provide. It took Respectable no more than a few seconds to come to the same conclusion. He looked at me blankly. Was he a friend of yours?" "No, I didn't know him at all, but we talked while the train was stopped. He was a nice man. I can hardly believe—" "I see." The man looked shaken. Though as a doctor he must often have seen death before. Maybe he was a dermatologist or chiropodist or something. Maybe I'd better stop chasing irrelevancies and think what to do. "I suppose we ought to notify the police," I suggested tentatively. "Or will the railway authorities do that? Sudden death, after all." The doctor sighed and nodded. "Yes, of course. I'll take care of it, though his appearance is quite consistent with heart attack." He shook his head. "A young man. What a pity." "Isn't it? Is there anything... I don't quite like to leave, but I'm very late for an appointment." "I shouldn't think there's anything for you to do. I have a mobile phone, of course. I'll ring the police and give this poor chap a bit of an examination while I wait about for them to come. Thank you for your concern, madam, but I believe I can take care of anything further that is required. There's no reason for you to put yourself out." "Well, then, my name is Martin, Dorothy Martin, and I live in Sheerbury if you should need me for anything." He thanked me again, with the sort of bored voice that clearly indicated I was becoming a nuisance. The train was empty by this time. I'd be ages getting a taxi. Feeling heartless for leaving the poor man, which was ridiculous, I gathered my things together and walked away. The streets, when I finally got out into them in one of London's wonderful black cabs, were crowded with traffic. They always are, but today seemed worse than usual. We were fast approaching high tourist season, and that means more foreigners trying to drive on the wrong side of the road. At least it wasn't raining, which creates an even worse snarl, though it looked as though it might start in at any time. A London June at its most typical, in fact. I usually enjoy the luxury of a cab ride through my favorite city and make the most of it, rubbernecking at familiar landmarks like the rawest tourist, but today I was preoccupied. I spent that ride and the half hour I had to wait in the doctor's office thinking about the poor man on the train. He'd been young, as the doctor had remarked, no more than 30 at a guess. How terrible and unexpected to have a heart attack at that age. My first husband, Frank, had died of a massive heart attack that had come like a thief in the night to steal him away from me, but he'd been 65 and had done a lot of living. Poor Bill had had his life in front of him, or he'd thought he had. He'd never marry that pretty girl now, the one whose picture he carried around with him. He'd never look up those relatives in Ireland. He'd never have the chance to straighten out the problems his company was having in the London office, or even finish the Tom Clancy novel he'd abandoned when we'd started to talk. He'd never see London. So close, and yet he'd never see one of the world's greatest cities. He'd been looking forward to it, too, after spending the weekend in the country with one of his business associates, recovering from jet lag. His book, Patriot Games, began in London, and he was eager to see what he'd been reading about. I twisted in my uncomfortable doctor's office chair. If I hadn't gone for coffee when I did, if there hadn't been such a long line at the counter, if I'd been more observant and hadn't just thought he was asleep. There was no reason why I should feel responsible, but I'd liked young Bill, and he was a fellow American, and I'd wanted to watch his face when he stepped out into glorious London. Maybe I'm a sentimental idiot, but I was near tears by the time the nurse called me in. At least the doctor, when he had finished examining me and we were seated in his consulting room, had good news for me. "That's looking splendid, Mrs. Martin," he said, pointing out details of an X-ray. "You have the bones of a woman half your age, save for the arthritic joints. I did not expect a break as bad as this to heal so completely so soon, particularly since you insisted on so much activity. Do you have any pain in the leg now? It aches a little when it rains," which in England was a good percentage of the time, but I decided not to say so. The English can be touchy about their weather. "Yes, well, that unfortunately may persist for quite a time, but on the whole I think I can send you off with a clean bill of health. Do what you want, within reasonable limits, of course. Light housework, shopping, a bit of a walk now and again. Use the cane when you need it. Apart from that," he shrugged his shoulders, "don't fall down any more stairs." He laughed. I was unable to laugh with him. That fall had been one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. If Alan hadn't been there— "I don't plan to, Dr. Reynolds," I said rather primly. He composed his face. "No, indeed. I'll give you a prescription for the pain if you need it, but aspirin ought to provide relief in most cases, or ibuprofen. All right, then?" I shook his hand and left, rather glad that Dr. Reynolds was not my regular doctor. For most ailments I went to the small clinic in Sheerbury, my beloved adopted town. I'd been living in England for almost 2 years now, and had gotten used to the idea of virtually free health care. I'd even established a good relationship with one of the doctors at the clinic. But when I had broken my leg last November, Alan had thought I'd better consult a London orthopedist. I'd murmured something about the exorbitant cost of a private doctor. "Hang the cost, Dorothy. I've only just got you, woman, and I intend to look after you. Since you insist on getting yourself into trouble, the least I can do is attempt damage control. I'm not a poor man, my dear, and you are very precious to me." It was the last remark that did it, of course, the words and the tone of voice in which they were uttered. We'd been married only a couple of months then. Alan hadn't uttered a word of anything but sympathy and concern when I'd fallen and broken the leg, even though I had at the time been engaged in dangerous activities of which he didn't entirely approve. I'd felt the least I could do was accept his advice. It was probably good advice, too, and I had to admit Dr. Reynolds was competent. It was just his attitude that I found a little annoying. He seemed to feel an old lady ought to tend to her knitting. I don't consider myself old, and I knit very badly. I'd planned my day so as to avoid the rush hour, but the various delays had plunged me into the very worst of it. Though the Regent's Park tube station wasn't far away, my leg was aching a little, and the underground would be crowded to suffocation point, So I waited with what patience I could muster and finally managed to snare a cab. My driver was